Welcome to Replayable, where we go into depth on our favorite tabletop games that keep us coming back again and again. I'm the start player, Todd, and today I'm joined by Megan and David. For our 38th episode, we will be trying to uncover the details of a murder from the victim themselves in Mysterium. It was designed by Alexander Nevsky and Oleg Sidorenko, with artwork by Igor Burlikov, Xavier Collette, Alexander Nevsky, and Oleg Sidorenko.
Nevsky, like as in the Nevsky Project. It's a good, one of my favorite short stories.
Okay. You know, you're a Russian lit guy, so of course you know that. It was originally released by Libelud in 2015. I'm sending you to a question to answer.
Ooh.
Serpents and spiders, tail of a rat, call in the spirits wherever they're at.
Nice. Love it. Mysterium is a cooperative deduction game where one player takes the role of the ghost while everyone else is a psychic. To solve the crime, the ghost must use vision cards without talking to signal the details of the perpetrator, the location, and the object used. There is a limited number of rounds for the psychics to complete their versions of events. Finally, the candidates are lined up and the ghost tries to signal the actual answer. So this is our Halloweenish episode because the events in this game are supposed to be set in the 1920s on All Hallows Eve, or Samhain as they refer to it, when the barrier between the worlds is the closest. Do you remember the first time you played this game, and what did you think of it? You would be on mute, so you're a fantastic ghost.
I'm curious to know Megan's answer because I looked in our group library and the three of us are the only ones who own a copy. So I'm doing a little bit of deduction. So I bought it after I played one of your copies. So I've removed myself from the suspect pool. Whose copy did we play first?
Oh, I don't know. Well, probably mine then.
Oh, okay.
For good podcasting material, Megan is shaking her head and saying it wasn't her. So that narrowed it down quite substantially.
It was one of those games that halfway through the first game, I probably got out my phone and started shopping and had purchased my copy, and it was on its way before we even finished our first game. It was love at first sight for me.
I'll say for me, I thought it would be love at first sight. I was someone who was always into games that have any sort of deductive piece to them. I love solving a crime in a game, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And slightly spooky makes me feel like I'm watching Scooby-Doo or something, like a nice, mild, palatable level of spooky. That's exactly what I want. And I will say I still haven't learned to love this game. I want to. I feel like I should, but I'm not there.
I'm surprised. I'm glad you didn't hold that off to the end like Paul does to us sometimes, where he talks about the game and goes, I give it a 4. But I didn't know. I thought this was a big game for you. I'm surprised to hear this.
I wish I have not played it much. I haven't looked at BG stats, but I think I've only played this maybe 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And I feel like that is part of the issue. But I wish I'd loved it from play 1, you know?
Yeah, for me, I mean, the theme hits right away. That sort of Edwardian seance, you know, in real life, which I find a little bit hooey, but in a game, like, I love the theme. It's like it's one of my theme kryptonites. Like, Todd, I know one of yours is Alchemists, is a theme kryptonite. Like, it could be a bad Kickstarter from a game that people said they hate from a publisher who always like reneges, and you're like, I'm going to back it anyways.
That is so true. I'm all over Little Alchemists, you know, now that that's available.
I'll play it with you. But like Megan said, spooky haunted house, kind of just slightly spooky, but that sort of theme, it's right up my alley. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I agree. And I love these games where you're trying to signal something somehow secretly, right? In this case, you're not allowed to talk. So you're using the vision cards to clue the details of each person's individual version of the history. And that one kind of feels funky. It's like, why am I trying to give everybody their own set of events instead of just signaling the same one to everybody? You know, from a narrative side, that seems odd, but from a gameplay perspective, it's fantastic. And it creates some interesting challenges that we're going to talk about, especially when you're the ghost. So I received this as a Secret Santa gift from our friend Anna in the Werewolf group. And the first play, Megan, you weren't in it. We had Drew and Tiffany. So we had a couple of folks that have since left the regular crew, although we may see them occasionally. But that's going back in the Wayback Machine to look at that lineup. I enjoy playing it, but it's not one that comes to mind when, we're thinking about what are we going to play at, say, 6 players.
I play it a ton. So
you do?
In my house, this is the game that if we have non-gamers over, if my kids bring over some friends or a friend and their family, we've done that quite a bit. This is, is it a gateway game? I'm not really sure, but this is certainly, when they say, we hear you guys play games, can we play something? This is for sure the game that's coming out every time because it's a big experience. And as a psychic, it's really easy to step into.
Right.
I don't even need to explain the whole game. I start every one with, I've been murdered, murder most foul. Right. And you have been called, you psychics from around the world to solve my murder. And, and I'm immediately into, you start the rules description with the theme. And then all they have to do is interpret this card that I'm giving to. It's super easy for them to step into. And it always is a hit.
Okay, that's fantastic. How do you feel about this style of game then, where you're trying to signal a partner or a team without talking? If you think about games, is this even a genre that you classify as its own, or does you just lump it into deduction games?
I think I do lump it in with deduction, but now I'm wondering if I shouldn't. But I really enjoy this theoretically. In reality, though, it's really high pressure for me. And it's hard for me sometimes to take the pressure off. I've never played as the ghost. Just like in Mind MGMT, I've never played as the, whatever that is, the person who moves.
Right.
I've never played as that. And something like One Night Werewolf, something that's real quick, or even like Decrypto, where it's just for one turn that you're kind of responsible for conveying something, that feels less pressure filled than something like this. But I don't know how much of that is me and how much of that's the game. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that. I mean, not my insecurities, but the game.
We have a lot to talk about that. I agree that playing as the ghost, it's more work, but playing as a psychic is more stressful for sure. Because when you get your cards, you're like, I'm about to reveal to everybody at this table that I'm pretty stupid. That like, I don't know what I'm doing. Because they gave you the cards. They're like, I'm trying to tell you something. I gave you all the information and you're like, I don't know. What's the answer? Carrots? Like, I don't know. And you have this stress or where you're trying to interpret the card. Whereas at the other end where the ghost is, it's like the cartoon cloud of like stuff flying out because they're just so busy, like doing all this stuff and throwing the cards around. And it's not as stressful from the ghost perspective. I don't think. It's just more busy work. But the psychic, you've just been sitting there waiting and you get your one chance to do something. You're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what this means. So I totally get that.
So lots of stuff to unpack here. I think this is great. Megan, you prefer playing as the psychic almost by default, right? Because you have yet to play as the ghost. Dave, do you have a preference either way?
I think I like them both equally because I'm constantly introducing this to new friends and especially like my kids' friends. I'm very often the ghost. More than 50% of the time I've been the ghost because it is kind of a bureaucracy load or administrative load to be the ghost. And I can do that better than, my kids can do it or something like that. So it's a good as an introduction. But I don't have a preference because I really like the kind of sit back method of being the psychic where I can just kind of take it in and enjoy the experience a little more.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think I tend to like playing the ghost just because I like being in control, but it's also nice to not have that pressure that Megan was describing where it feels like you are responsible for running the game. And if ultimately you get to the end of the game and you were the ghost and they vote the wrong way, most of the time I feel like that onus was on me. I may have not put out the right cards to signal what the actual answer was. I guess that's another one of the interesting things about the game is you're limited to the cards you have in your hand, short of using a raven, and you get to choose which one of the stories is the answer. You can say, I'm going to choose a story that matches up with the cards I have. Maybe that's why you have to signal 5 or 6 different answers, depending on how many psychics there are, so that you have a chance of actually having cards that align. Megan, you mentioned Mind MGMT. Great game. Another one of those games where one person is doing something separately from the rest of the group. In that case, it's competitive. So in the same vein, you have Scotland Yard, you have Letters from Whitechapel. Do you consider those styles of games to be, those hidden movement games where you're trying to capture somebody? Do you think of those as in the same category as Mysterium?
Yeah, 1,000%. I think it's very similar. And I would add to that Betrayal at House on the Hill a little bit, even though that's like another one, right?
Right.
I think it all feels very similar, that whether it is cooperative or competitive, I think there is something about being the one and then there being the group and kind of feeling like victory may rest on you,
Right.
which is another kind of tension in board games, which I think is fun, but I couldn't only play that kind of game.
Oh, no.
Because I think just there is a pressure to it, which I think can be enjoyable, but there also needs to be a limit.
Right.
Yeah, from the psychic's perspective, I could see this and Mind MGMT being very similar. Mm-hmm. From the ghost perspective, or it's not an agent, but whatever the master of ceremonies is in Mind MGMT.
It's the recruiter. The recruiter is trying to find new recruits for Mind MGMT, and everyone else are rogue agents.
In that case, it's a very different experience because you're at odds with the other players. You're in competition with the other players. But from the bulk of the players' perspective, it's very similar. You're working on a deduction together. So we started to talk about deduction. I was actually surprised to see deduction as one of the game mechanisms listed for this game. But then I started to think, well, wait, what do I think deduction actually means? And for me, deduction, I think, is you have to be presented with facts, or you have to be presented with known starting points. Mm-hmm. And then you use reasoning or a line of logic to get to another point. In this case, when you hand me a card, I don't even know what part of this card is supposed to be telling me something. There's so much more intuition and gut feelings and vibes that I'm going off of that aren't really a part of a deduction, though there are elements, like there's swords in this card and there's swords on that card. So then you are actually using deduction. But for some reason, probably just a short side on my part, is just I was surprised to think, oh, wait, is this a deduction game? I guess so, because I just think of it as a limited communication game, which right. I guess that by default involves a little bit of deduction where I'm trying to deduce what you're communicating to me.
Yep, I think those go hand in hand.
Totally agree.
I guess so. It's just that you never have known information. That's the part that, I'm not really following a line of logic. I'm riding a wave of vibes to get to, where I'm trying to go. And then I'm just making a guess at the end.
Right. I think I'm going to table this discussion until we get into the comparisons, just because I don't necessarily want to step on answers now. But if you think about the best games of this deduction style, it's going to be interesting. I know for myself, I would say one of my comparisons. So let's hold off. But okay. I do want to hear your Mount Rushmores for this style of game. So Dave, you mentioned you enjoyed when you get to play as a psychic and you get to sit back and you wait your turn to do something. Let's talk about timing and where its place is in this game. Apparently, it's not overwhelmingly downtime for you as a psychic because you keep bringing this out for other people, but you are waiting for it. Is there also a timing element to the ghost? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm a little confused about the question because you have it in the prompts as to what timing. Do you mean as far as just downtime between turns, or how much time do you have to go get a sandwich or something, like that sort of thing?
Because that does have that much time.
Well, sometimes, if you've got 6 people at the table and you're, as the ghost, feeding out cards to them, one person could be sitting there for a while. But on their end, it's cooperative. So once you start feeding clues out to somebody, the psychics have something to do to look at other people's cards and see what's happening over there and kind of make their decisions based on that before they get their own cards. So, we don't, I guess I'll step on my house rule. We don't use the little sand timer that came with the game. It's just like, hurry it up and keep it moving. There's no reason really. That feels like a false constraint. I guess it fits with the theme because there is literally supposed to be a clock running. But in the most part, just as the ghost, you just keep it moving. And when you hand out the last ones, let's go, everybody, make your decision, and let's move on. The stakes are not that high, really.
Right. Isn't that when the sand timer comes out after the last cards go out?
Yes, and then I don't know if it's a 1 minute or 2 minute timer, but then now all the psychics have to finish making their guesses within that time.
Right. Megan, thoughts on timing? Do you want me to explain it a little more?
No. Really, what was interesting to me about what the two of you just said was that thinking of, would the ghost just walk away, get a sandwich during that? Because I think it really depends on what's going on with your group. But if they're talking to each other, if they're talking about their interpretation of the cards and like, hey, this card with a hot air balloon attached to a pirate ship and a ladder and a harp on it, and like all they're focused on is the harp, and they're like, this has to be attached to this musical instrument that's in this room or whatever, then that's giving the ghost information. They're like, they're not reading this as pirate ship, which is what I thought, so that they would connect this with something else. They're reading it as musical instrument. And so to me, I'm like, oh, why would the ghost ever walk away? Like, because that is giving you information for, for helping them get this.
Right.
Now, again, I guess maybe there's people who feel like the ghost shouldn't know that. How are you interpreting the rules and the theme here? I don't know. But it does seem like the ghost is getting a lot of information potentially from the mediums.
I totally agree with that. I mean, we breezed over Todd's question a little bit about the limited communication. And I think this harkens back to that, is that the psychics are not limited at all in their communication. They can say or do whatever they want. And that one-way communication is definitely part of the game, is as a ghost, taking their temperature all the time. Like, where are they with this one? What are they thinking over here? And this one, I know this player has figured it out. So that's information I can use and things like that. So for sure.
And that's what I kind of meant by timing, because you don't have to hand out your vision cards in the same order every time, right? It's just not clockwise around the table.
Yeah.
So if I know that I've got a great card for Dave and it's going to allow him to accurately guess who the character is, then that's one less option for Megan to have to consider when she's evaluating the card that I hand her. So I feel like timing can play a role in that fashion, because you can actually use it to say, okay, I'm going to hand out these easy ones, and then there will be less opportunity for confusion when I hand out the ones that may be a little more vague.
Which gets to the hand management portion of it as well, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
First of all, I was just going to point out, I feel like there is a meta element to this game. Do we want to talk about how certain groups will settle that, oh, this vision card always signals this object or this location sort of thing?
Yeah, that's hard to avoid. When you have a memorable moment where this card perfectly at this moment in time in the game matched that, and you're playing with this group again, everyone's going to remember that. Like, that's the general card.
Right.
Which in some ways kind of breaks the game, right?
I think it does, but I think it's also a delight. Like, who wants to ruin the fun of that? I think you get to have those fun moments. Yeah, suddenly that card means this one thing specifically, great. But it also means that it doesn't mean any of the other things on that card. Like, it can't be used for anything else. And so in a way, maybe that balances it out.
Mm-hmm. When I think of that, I think of a game that I didn't even attend. I don't know if either of you were there, but I think this was at BGG Con, a game of Dixit, where the image was the guy who looks like a pile of leaves with a walking stick walking away, and somebody's clue was keep on, keeping on. And I wasn't even there, and I heard the story, and every time I see that card, I think, keep on, keeping on. Like, what a perfect clue for that card. And that card for me is ruined for absolutely anything else.
Well, I think one of the ways that they get around it is they give you more of the characters' objects locations, right? They give you 18 of them each in the base game. And you're only going to set out a subset. And that depends on the difficulty level and the number of players. So you may not have the perfect match for the vision card. Like, if you get the person running down the hallway that's being chased by the knight, it's like, well, I may not have the location or the object that really matches well to that. So that's another way to get around it.
Yeah.
Dave, you were talking about hand management. And so I jumped in and talked about cards. But did you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. Well, so as the ghost, you've got 7 cards. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have cards that, like, I have no idea what to do with this card. I got to get it out of my hand. Mm-hmm. And based on the difficulty level that you're playing, you have ravens, which are basically just tokens to mark when you can discard from your hand and redraw.
Right.
Which you can do once a round, 3 times a game, whatever difficulty level you've selected. So then beyond that, you start to find ways as the ghost to kind of dump the trash out of your hand.
Right.
And we were talking about this just a tiny bit before we started. This is where the one thing where I feel like I play the system probably more than it should be played, bordering on, am I cheating the system? Right. And I'm talking about the situation when, as the ghost, I know Todd has figured out who he is. Maybe he got it wrong on the first round and everybody moved. There's only like 2 choices left. And I've heard him say, I bet I'm the cook or something like that.
Right.
And once he said that, and I got a bunch of junk in my hand, I hand him all 7 of my cards. Like he just gets like a LSD trip of visions coming from me. And that
Right.
in like so many words means, yes, you figured it out. And now I've cleared out my hand. So whatever you just said is correct. That's borderline, not borderline. It's not in the spirit of the rules, borderline probably cheating. Yet I still do it.
Yeah, that's the virtual Raven. When you have an opportunity within the game construct to dump all those cards and redraw if you need to without using a Raven, that's poetry.
Right. But further than that, it's a Raven and a bold lettered yes to the player.
Right? Let's house rule it. What if you're like the last person to figure out who your character was and there's only one choice left?
Well, there's never only one choice left because there's at least 2 more well, I guess there could be because they chose them and got them wrong. You're right. That is possible.
And you guessed the other one that is not yours. So now you have one choice left coming up.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, you should be allowed to dump all your cards
without the trash. Yeah.
All right. As people are talking about it, there's this clairvoyance mechanism, right? Trying to figure out how accomplished of a psychic are you really? And you can bet on someone's interpretation of their clue. And if you get those bets right, then your clairvoyance level goes up. And at the end of the game, when you're trying to figure out what was the actual sequence of events or components of them, you get to see more cards, right? That's the result of having a higher score. How do you feel about that clairvoyance mechanism?
I like that. For me, it's helpful in taking the pressure I feel down a little because I might have no clue what's going on with mine, but like it's very clear to me what's going on with Todd's. So I can at least, and I'm like, I know Todd's going to get, and so I can be like, okay, that's nice that there's a way to be like, no, I do understand pieces of this game,
right?
Even if I might not understand entirely what's happening for me.
Yeah, I love it. It adds a little bit of competition in this cooperative game because it's low stakes on the competition level. It's high stakes in that how you do with your clairvoyance is how many cards you get to see in phase 2. So as a mechanism, it works really well for that in that final stage. But it's kind of fun, especially with table talk where everybody's like, you're wrong. Or like, I like the cut of your jib over here. My son and I always mess with each other. We're like, before I'll just put an X on his marker saying, whatever you choose is wrong. Take my marker with you. And, we're always kind of taking the piss with that. So it's a fun little element that almost feels like it didn't have to be there, but it just, sweetener on top that I think makes that little bit of competition makes it pretty fun.
Right. And we were playing the digital version and I had forgotten to turn on clairvoyance. And it felt like there was an integral part of the game that was missing to do it that way. And then the end result was, regardless of how you fared during the course of the game, you got to see all 3 cards, which helped. But I felt like that was obviously a mistake constructing the game and helped me appreciate how much clairvoyance brought to it, especially just in the interests of the psychics. Now, I'll say that the game also moved a heck of a lot faster on the digital one.
Right. Yeah, I was surprised to see clairvoyance was an option that you need to turn on because to me, that's one of the core mechanisms of the game.
Right.
What a good way to see how important something is to a game is try the game without it and see what you think. And like without
Right.
it, I'm like, what even is this game? Well, what did you think about the digital implementation otherwise?
So I think you and I were both on iPads and it felt buggy as all get out.
Yeah.
Like there were a couple of times I couldn't even start the game. I had to force quit and restart it. And the version on Steam's a little more solid. We did not try crossing the streams and seeing if someone on an iPad could join a host on Steam or vice versa.
I think, yes, it was buggy. I had to force quit as well on my end. And I was reading about reviews of it and people said they've had to, force quit in the middle of a game and then they couldn't rejoin. So the game was just lost. But overall, I feel like it doesn't capture the experience of the game. Part of that one-way communication that we were talking about is as the ghost, I can't hear what you're thinking. This card shows up out of nowhere, which I guess approximates exactly what the ghost is supposed to be doing. But then that's kind of it. It is a social game, and the social element is totally removed. There's no collaboration on the psychic's part. There's no fun. There's just... And honestly, it does feel a little bit random. Even though I know that you selected the card, card and you gave it to me.
Right.
There's AI in the game usually, unless we're going to have 5 people playing online, which doesn't seem like a situation I'm going to be in ever. But usually there's AI involved, and the AI isn't terrible, but at the same time, I'm not sure the AI isn't just RNG. Right?
That's funny.
Yeah, I feel like for me, where digital versions of games really sing are either when the game takes forever and a year to set up and tear down. And so a digital version to help you manage all the pieces parts is great. Or when it's a game that just playing the game is enjoyable and it's not necessarily the social aspect of the game that's the fun part, it's the mechanics or whatever. This game is not that complicated to set up and tear down. And the social is a huge part of it. And so it just feels like it's something that, okay, there's digital versions that exist, but I'm not sure, other than so that someone can make money off of them, I'm not sure why they exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It just I'll say a lot of the game's soul was removed by going to digital with this.
That's right.
Nice.
It's a ghost of the original game.
It is. Wow.
Nice.
Dave, you said when we're playing digitally, you can't hear what I'm thinking. If I'm the ghost, you're not supposed to hear what I'm thinking anyway.
Well, but if you're the ghost, no, not as the ghost, but I mean, no, I was saying that does approximate exactly what you're supposed to see in the game. When you're as the ghost, give me a card, the card just appears out of nowhere, and that's all I get from you.
Right.
And even though that does approximate it well, it still felt lesser. But going the other way around, yeah, as the ghost, you get no feedback from your psychics.
Right.
You don't know what they're thinking with these cards you've been handing them. So I keep giving you cards that show, pointy things, and you're not even looking at the pointy things.
Right. It brings up an interesting thing that happens in the game. I guess the ghost not only can't talk, but also needs to maintain a poker face. And yet sometimes it's so hard not to break when people are like either really right or really wrong, and you want to roll your eyes, or, you're trying not to laugh, all those little things. I think that's also part of the fun of being the ghost, is trying to keep that straight face. And yeah, all of those little details are just lost in the digital implementation.
And I think we're pretty good at keeping the poker face as the ghost, because I think it's super important. I feel like I can't think of what it is. I feel like there is a game that we play where we aren't good at keeping that poker face, and yet we just flub it. It's like So Clover or something like that. There's one game where we kind of allow ourselves more than we should. I can't remember what it is, but most games like that, Just One, or, I don't want to step on all of our games that might be coming up, in our mentions in the future, but most games like that, where I think we're really good at, you just suffer in silence.
Right.
Inside that, like, they're either getting it or they're not getting it. I mean, we just talked about this with Clans. It was kind of the same. It's like, you got to keep that. It breaks the game if you don't. And in Clans, it's different because it's a competitive game.
Right.
But I don't want to be shaking my head or nodding my head, because that's obviously against the spirit of the game.
So I think the art is so beautiful and so fun to play with. And that's why even when you're feeling frustrated and not getting what the ghost is telling you, you're at least getting to really sit there and analyze and think through what is showing up, what's in these images in front of me. And I just wanted to bring up, I have a visual aid for this podcast.
What?
And so I'll send you a link. Todd, you'll put this link in the show notes, right? That's what you'll do?
Apparently he will. He's been instructed.
Right?
Yes. So when I was a child, which was much more recently than the two of you were children.
Wow.
What's happening? What are we doing here?
Anyway. There was a book called The Mysteries of Harris Burdick, and it's by Chris Van Allsburg, who's the same person that did Polar Express. And if you're looking through the link, this is from some teacher's presentation. If you're looking through these illustrations, these were things that teachers often, when I was in elementary school, would put up places and have us do little writing prompts from them.
Mm-hmm.
Because these images have a little more to them than what seems like at first.
Yeah, these are great.
And it makes me think of Mysterium. Like Mysterium makes me think of this and vice versa. And so it really connected with this like childhood memory for me. And I can't help but think that the illustrators behind both Dixit and Mysterium must have seen this book. Obviously by, the Polar Express is something that's very well known. And so I don't know if maybe they had been familiar with this author. But yeah, there is something to those images that's a little haunting, a little spooky, and really makes me think of Mysterium. And I just really enjoy that art. And there's just such a clear, in my mind, connection, though maybe they're going to be like, no, we never saw that. But in me, they're just so connected.
Do you know, is Van Allsburg the illustrator of this?
I think he is both author and illustrator, but
okay.
I would need someone to fact check me.
If this isn't a direct inspiration, then this must be a style of art that they're kind of dealing in, if there are other artists that kind of go along with this style, because I can definitely see it's not as busy.
Yeah.
There aren't as many random elements going on, but it's definitely in the style of.
Mm-hmm. We've mentioned Dixit several times. Interestingly enough, also published originally by Libelud. This is their bailiwick, is creating these games that have confusing or multi-layered imagery in them. Could you play Mysterium with Dixit cards?
I have never tried, but I think absolutely.
I think it crosses everyone's mind while playing it, like, oh, this is just a different use for like Dixit cards. Right. But I actually pulled some out and I looked at them side by side because I've never actually done it myself.
Right.
And I looked at them side by side. And really, the Dixit cards, I think, are a little simpler than the Mysterium cards. The Mysterium cards are very busy, as they need to be.
Yep.
Right.
Because you're looking for different elements to clue. Whereas the Dixit cards, they usually don't have as many different colors going on. They're usually brighter in theme as well. So thematically, they don't quite fit. But I don't see why it couldn't be done. I feel like it would be a little bit harder because I also think the Mysterium cards intentionally hint at certain elements that are on the other cards in the game, the suspect cards and all of that. So it could be done. Well, and honestly, without the expansions, which we'll probably talk about pretty soon, you probably would want to start mixing in Dixit cards because I'm at the point, even after like 10 plays, I got to the point where you're seeing the same cards over and over and over, and you need some new variety.
Right. So all of those things, I agree. I think it creates a harder game because, as you say, the cards in Mysterium are geared towards elements in each of the objects and characters and locations. There would be looser connections to try to make. So it would be a harder experience, but you could do it.
Right. Yep.
All right. So with that, let's move on to the prompts. And Dave, I see you're no longer in it. I am interested, though. When you said we had the same answer for the first one, did you mean the first prompt?
For the first prompt, we very specifically had the same answer. So I'll
all right.
Well, maybe word for word. I don't know. But I'm like, hey, wait, did he read mine? If this makes the cut at all, I stumbled into Todd's prompts. And usually we come into these prompts without knowing the answers that the other people are going to give.
Right.
And Todd called it Todd's prompts. Which is basically like saying, go away, keep out, and I still opened it up. I'm like, what's this?
Yeah.
I don't know what I was expecting. So I read your first response.
I'm just lazy on that because that folder for this episode is shared between us so we can collaborate on like the notes. To keep my prompts private, I need to go back and like remove access.
Right. That's what, seeing them as shared, I thought, oh, I wonder why they're shared. And I thought maybe you had different prompts or some variations on the prompts so that we should be working with these. And once I saw that you have your answers in there, which by the way, I do my answers in red so that when we're going through, they stick out to me. So little tip for you there.
Another tip for me. So if I want it to be even more confusing for you, I need to put my answers in red the next time you stumble into my version.
Well, then it'll look like mine. I'm like, I don't remember thinking this.
It must be what you think, though, if it's there in red, right?
Well, in this one, honestly, if Todd had answered in red, I might have thought that I was writing my answers in Todd's prompts because the very first part of Todd's answer, which I think he's going to give right here, is exactly the same as what I wrote.
So we're talking about weight and complexity on Board Game Geek scale of 1 to 5. How would you rate the complexity of Mysterium? Do you want me to just go ahead and say my answer? Or?
Go ahead and say my answer. Yeah.
Say you're okay. I'm going to say it's a 2 if you're a psychic and it's a 3 if you're the ghost.
I agree.
Do you want to give our reason?
I didn't read the rest of your answer.
Oh, no, I didn't provide one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, reasoning is as the ghost, you just sit back. You have one job. You just look at the card and try to make a connection with something else. The ghost has that kind of overhead that you have to be managing.
So as the psychic, you just have one job.
Oh, that's what I meant. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I mean, I knew what you meant because psychic.
Psychic. Yes.
Megan, what did you have?
Well, since I've never played as the ghost, I just said I thought it was a 2.
Okay.
I think it's pretty straightforward to learn. I think the things that make it a little more complex, especially if it's your first time playing, will be that suddenly, if someone else guesses correctly and you didn't, suddenly you're at different phases. And sometimes having other people in a different place, I think, can be a little confusing. You know, it just can be a little strange. It's not something that I think is super typical in a game. So I think there is a little complexity. It's not a roll and move or something, you know, there's a little more to it. But I mean, obviously, Dave, you're just bringing brand new players into this and going with it all the time. So it can't be too complex.
And honestly, it's not as overwhelming as it seems like it might be. And the ghost screen actually does a really good job of organizing the information that you need. So you can tell whom you've already clued. You can tell what stage they're in and what you need to clue them next. It's that ghost screen does a great job of managing the cards.
Right.
It really makes it user-friendly.
Totally agree.
The hardest part about being the ghost is remembering the cards that are in the game that you don't have behind your screen, because there's always a few extra cards thrown in as fodder or just extra cards to get in the way.
Right. Distractors.
And so all the time I'm like, I've got a perfect card for this psychic, and you hand it to him and then you realize you had no idea. It better clues a card out there that you didn't even realize was out there.
Yes. And I think we're going to get to that here in just a bit. So strategy, how much opportunity is there for strategy and long-term planning on the same scale, 1 to 5?
This is a 1. I don't know what strategy or long-term planning you're using in this game. I don't know what that would look like. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm ready for you to come out and say a 5 and just absolutely stomp all over me. But I think it's a 1.
I'm not going to say it's a 5.
I also have it as a 1. I'll just jump on that. And I don't know that I've ever given a 1 on this podcast. But like I said, as a psychic, you've got one job. Interpret this card. Which one does it seem to match? And that's it. I mean, it's not really is it a strategy? Use all of your clairvoyance tokens before 4 o'clock, because you're going to get them all back. Maybe that's a strategy, or that's just a good suggestion. I don't know. But I don't really see any strategy in this game at all.
Okay. So again, I had another split score for this. I'm totally on board giving it a 1 for the psychics. As the ghost, though, I think it's a 3, because that hand management thing is tricky, especially when you're trying to reserve cards for clues you know are going to be coming, because you can see what Megan's going to be trying to guess for location when she gets past character. And I've got the perfect card for her. So now I've got to work around everything to try to save that. And when do I have the opportunity? Because Dave was the last person to guess his location. I've got that virtual raven, and I can dump all the cards out of my hand and redraw. So I think there's enough to juggle as the ghost trying to set up the team for success that I would say it's a 3.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as the ghost, if you're on easy mode where you get a raven a turn or whatever it is on easy mode, it's very easy to get through the entire deck of cards. So if you're looking for a specific card, you will probably see it.
I didn't think about that, but yeah. Okay. Luck. How much do you think luck plays a factor? Same scale, 1 to 5. I mean, we're drawing cards, so at a bare minimum, we're starting at a 2, right? What do you have, Megan?
I also think this is a 1.
Wow. Okay.
I think the Mysterium cards are well crafted enough that I don't think you can really miss out. I suppose if your game group has played well enough that there are those cards that are, hey, this automatically clues that, and that's what we have on the board. You know, I suppose with time for your group, there could be luck that really determines the way things go. But I think out of the box, no, I think it's very well crafted such that there's not just, I'm going to draw a hand of cards that aren't going to connect where I need them to.
Okay.
I agree with Megan. I have it as a 1. I think the only thing that might bump it up to a 2, it's not bad luck. It's times that you might stumble into good luck, where I drew the card with the ghost soldiers on it and I'm trying to clue somebody about the general. Like, you can maybe luck into just perfect. I have the perfect card, right at the perfect time to hand to somebody. So maybe that bumps it to a 2. But overall, with the opportunities for hand management, with, like Megan said, the multifaceted cards. It's, you're not supposed to have this specific card matches that. It's not the kind of game, as we said, we can do that. It's not the kind of game where you're supposed to be looking for the one card that matches that as those metas. You're supposed to just deal with what you've been given, whatever that happens to be.
All right. Well, I'm going to continue to be the dissenting opinion here. I had it down as a 3 because I started out with 2 drawing cards and then I gave it an extra bump for those situations that you described, Dave, where like you hand out a card that you didn't realize more strongly signaled one of the distractors. Or like even worse, you think it's the perfect card. And I'll reference Megan saying like, you think it's pirate ship because they're going to guess the picture on the wall of the den. And no, they're focused on the harp and the musical instrument. And like you didn't even consider that musical instrument was a way that card could have been interpreted. So for me, that feels like luck, that people luck into the same thought process that you had when you delivered that vision card.
Yeah.
I do want to clarify the pirate ship harp example card I gave was purely from the brain of Megan and does not exist in the game. I just feel like you've been referencing actual cards in the game. I do not know the game well. I do not have the illustrations memorized. So that was just a vibey product of my imagination.
All right. So if one of our listeners has an in with Libelud and wants and they need, a prompt for a new card to give out as the 2024 promo, we've got the idea. It's a pirate ship underneath a hot air balloon that has a harp somewhere in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got it. So then theme. How much do you think the theme has been integrated with this game? Same scale, 1 to 5. And I'm totally prepared to be the dissenting opinion, so I'll just lead and say 5. Like, I can't imagine how this gets more themey. And I don't want it to be any themier than it already is, because like someone would have to die. So for me, it's a 5. What did you have, Megan?
I have this as a weak 5.
A 1? Oh, okay.
So it's a 5. But it's like a 5-, which is to say, I think this is a great combination of theme and mechanics. However, I think you could take the theme away and still have a game here and have it be enjoyable. It's just maybe a complicated Dixit. But I can't imagine what other theme you could have with these mechanics. And so because of that, because there is such a connection there, I think that 5 is deserved.
Nice. All right, Dave?
Well, Megan, you were doing so well. Though you got the right answer. It's a 5, not a 5-. I do hear what you're saying, actually. I'm just joking around. But what actually bumped it up to like a solid 5 for me is when the ghost knocks.
Yeah.
That's the one communication you get is that, is it true? It hits all the points for a seance game, the theme that it's trying to do. I mean, what a way these cards approximate visions that the psychics are having. And I think it does it so well. So I'm very happy with it as the theme. And I think it works perfectly.
Agreed. Favorite player count. What is the best player count for this game? And Dave, I feel like you've probably tried it all over the place. What do you think?
I have not tried it all over the place because I don't think I've played it. I certainly haven't played 2 or 3. I don't think I've played 4, but I've been everywhere from 5 to 7. And my favorite is 5. I feel like 5 is just right. And 6 and 7 are fine. They do sort of, there's a little more of a sea of options. It does take longer because you're giving out more clues to people. And 5, I think, gives you that large group feel, but without expanding on the time and everything too much. Whereas 4 and below feels like you're just playing part of the game.
I had that almost point for point. 5.
Yep, I agree entirely. It's a 5.
All right, then least favorite player count. I'm not saying it's a bad game at this, but you would prefer not to play it here if you could play it at 5 players, let's say. What do you have?
Well, it's an intellectual observation as I haven't actually tried it, but I'd say 2.
Okay.
I don't have any interest. I have other games like this to play it too with deduction, whether it's Fugitive or Mr. Jack or something like that. That kind of scratch that same itch a little bit that I would much rather be playing it too.
Right?
Yep, exact same. 2.
Okay. So I get to be the dissenting opinion again. I will say 7. I think for the reasons you said 5 was better, I think at 7, which I have played, it gets too long and it outstays its welcome. 2 may not be as interesting, but it's over quicker. So it's actually, I think it scales down better than it scales up. So actual playing time, boxes can lie. Although I find it fascinating that this game has a very specific number. This game is going to take 42 minutes to play. And
are they saying 6 minutes per player, or is that 42 minutes at all player counts? Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Right? It makes me wonder if they're assuming you're using the 1 minute timer, but then isn't that still going to be player based? I don't know.
Is this a Hitchhiker's Guide reference?
It could be.
I don't know.
Is it a seventh son of a seventh son? And so after you do that 6 times, you're at 42.
Right. Or maybe it's like when when you go into a parking lot and it says the speed limit is 14 miles per hour, which is to get your attention because 15 is invisible. Like you see it, and it doesn't register, but you're like, why is it 14 and a third miles per hour?
Right.
Now I've noticed, which I have seen 14 and a third.
Isn't that on Disneyland when you're on the tram between the Ziggurat and the park?
That I'm not sure, but I go to I go to mines for work sometimes, or factories, and I was at a mine just recently up at State Line on the way to Nevada, and it's 14 and a third miles per hour, which just gets your attention right away. They're like, they want me to be specific here. They want me to follow this rule.
Right. So, Megan, thoughts on playing time? And we'll get around. So you're essentially the first person to answer this question.
I will say this game takes longer than I expect it to when I play it.
Right.
It feels like a long game to me. As for what the box says, I think it does absolutely depend on player count. That seems just like total nonsense to me.
Right.
I think it is a bit longer. I don't know, but you've played more than I have, so I'm curious to hear from both of you.
Well, my 5 and 6 player games have been in the hour to an hour 30 range.
Yeah.
So I'm basically almost doubling down on what the printed box time takes, at least in the at the higher end of things. Yeah, I think it's longer than the printed time.
This is one of those cases because a lot of times, your question is, boxes lie. And this is the time, usually I'm actually not that far off from the box, but in this case, this box is lying. It is straight up lying. I can't see doing this in 42 minutes unless we're liberally employing metas. I'm handing you the cards that you already know the answers to. We've played this 100 times. It's the only way I could see this getting down to 42. I'm the same. It's an hour to an hour and a half, but temper that a little bit. I'm always playing with new players. I'm often playing with teenagers. And so there's a lot of, wandering around like puppies kind of thing, and people on their phones and that sort of thing. So that's when we get into the 90-minute range. But overall, I would say it's a 60-minute game.
Now, are they texting the ghost?
Yeah, well, no, I'm the ghost.
Okay.
I'm usually the ghost.
There you go. Okay, expansions. There are 2 main expansions for a bunch of promo cards. Sadly, not the one that Megan has prompted. So there's
Hidden Signs and Secrets and Lies. I have them both.
So what are your thoughts on them?
Well, Hidden Signs is just more cards, which is very welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, I was going to say it doesn't dilute the deck, but I guess it does dilute the deck, which is the point. So this is the case, we talked about it with Wingspan, is when we add cards to Wingspan, we're diluting the deck and we're not seeing the cards that we kind of need to see to create combos or synchronicities or things like that. But in this case, more is better. Just the more you have, the better so you don't see those same cards again. I mean, we complain about, or at least I do, I complain about expansions all the time on how they just add unneeded things to games and ruin the spirit of the game. This is the case where it's perfect. It's just more suspects, more objects, more locations, and more vision cards. And it's exactly what's needed.
Couldn't agree more. Yes. I think it enhances the game, especially if your group has started to develop that meta around certain card and object combinations.
Yeah.
So then Secrets and Lies replaces the object cards with story cards. So instead of trying to signal a murder weapon, it's more, what was the motivation behind the murder? Mm-hmm. And it adds a wrinkle to the guessing, which makes it harder. I like it. I'm not necessarily sure I'd want to play it all the time, but then it also has more suspects, locations, and objects. So like Hidden Signs, I think that's a benefit.
I totally agree. More cards is better. And then using those story cards instead of the object cards increases the difficulty a little bit. Again, since I'm usually playing with new players, I'm not mixing that in. But if you're playing with the same group over and over, because the object round, the third stage of the game, that is the easiest one.
Right.
It's a little bit anticlimactic after you've gotten your suspect, you've gotten your location, and now, you're wrong sometimes, but now obviously you're signaling the syringe or something. Like that's just the easiest one. Right. And so making that a little bit tougher could be welcome. I don't feel the need for it, but I don't think it ruins the game at all and can enhance a game for players who are starting to feel a little stale.
Yep. Megan, do you have thoughts on either of the expansions?
I don't have experience with either of them, so I'm sorry that I mean, I can try to come up with something to share, but I feel like that might not be a service to the audience.
All right. Okay, so most recognizable comparison. What's the highest ranking game that reminds you the most of Mysterium?
I'm excited about this. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Are we eliminating Dixit as an option, or is Megan going to say Dixit?
I mean,
it's just, it's
if
there.
If you don't
it's
say
just,
Dixit, what is the point?
It's too obvious.
well, I didn't disallow it, so...
Yeah.
Megan, what's your choice?
I mean, here's the thing. I'll say Dixit. Do you want me to say something else? But that then eliminates something else, you know?
No, it is a great answer. It's obvious. It's a perfect connection.
Yeah,
it is.
It's got to be Dixit, you know, because why else earlier would we have said, like, oh, would you play Mysterium with Dixit cards? Like the vibes, man, the cards, the illustrations, and the guessing, you know, that's all very similar. They feel like they're sibling games, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You would not explain this Mysterium to somebody who doesn't know Mysterium without using the word Dixit. Right. Like if you're trying to explain, have you ever heard of Mysterium? Like, okay, well, it's like Dixit. Like
yes.
you would do that every time.
Yeah.
So it's in the answer.
So good choice, Megan. We agree. Dave, what did you have?
Well, I think mine is equally as obvious, so maybe I shouldn't have given Dixit such a hard time, but I'm going to say Codenames Pictures.
Okay.
Where you have limited communication, you're trying to convey that information, you know, in that cooperative way to, you know, your team or however you're playing. Now, I'm going specifically with Pictures, which is maybe my least favorite version of Codenames, but the Codenames Pictures are, you know, a very straightforward image. They're not crazy like the Mysterium images, but it fits that same space. And if you know, if you're into Codenames Pictures, you might be into Mysterium.
Or Dixit.
Right.
So I went with a game from 2014, and that's Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Imagine playing Mysterium. There's only one solution. You are basically the forensics investigator trying to clue the detectives as to what happened as part of the crime scene. But one of the detectives is the killer and therefore is a traitor role. It's Mysterium with one solution and a traitor role. And I am biased about this game because I demonstrated it in the Gray Fox Games booth at BGG Con in 2015. So I played a lot of it.
So that brings up a couple questions for me. I'm really glad that you mentioned this because I've heard of Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And I remember when it came out, my impression was that it was a version of another game. Is it its own game or is it a reskin of Mysterium?
It is not a reskin. In fact, Mysterium came out after.
Oh,
so
okay.
Murder in Hong Kong came in 2014.
It's a pre-skin.
It's
a pre-skin.
Wow.
Well, Mysterium came out before 2015, right? It wasn't available here until 2015.
So that's true. Mysterium itself is a re-implementation of an older game that I cannot pronounce.
Yeah.
So it's Tajamixi Demostuo. You know, that'll be as close as I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And so that game is from 2013. So yes, they could have taken the idea of that one and incorporated it into Deception, but I didn't make that connection. So you could be right.
That was just the impression that I got at the time. And I never played that, so I never got to see that out or see what that was supposed to be compared to. Now, my other question is, we are all card-carrying fans of hidden traitor games. Is this game better if there's a hidden traitor element? I'm thinking no, but this seems like the kind of game that would have something like that, right?
Yeah, like if the murderer is somehow trying to throw you off.
Right, one of the suspects or one of the psychics is the murderer.
But like they're trying to make it so that the ghost doesn't know that it's them, you know?
That gets into, maybe like werewords or something like that, where there's roles.
Yeah.
I don't want this for the game. I like it as it is. But it did start me thinking along this path because we love these social deduction games. That takes it into a social deduction kind of game.
Yeah. I've been trying to think, how would you manage that information component?
Right.
Because as the ghost, you're not deciding which version of events is true until you're doing the lineup. So there would have to be some way to have everyone appear that they could be the traitor, right? Because you just said, okay, Megan, here are your special cards so that you know what the answer is going to be so you can dissuade the rest of us from it. Well, that obviously signals you out as a traitor, so that doesn't work. I don't know. I don't know how that would work.
It would take some new mechanisms in the game because the psychics are not giving any information. The psychics are only receiving information. So there's no really way to disseminate bad information or things like that.
So what that tells me is you need to play deception, because the opportunity to dissuade people is possible when everyone is looking at the same set of facts or the same clues. When we each have our own, I really don't have a chance to pollute yours that much, except maybe I've got a different interpretation of your card and I'm going to try to come up with a rationale for why you should pick away from what I think is actually being signaled to you.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So do we want to tackle Mount Rushmore? Do we have a Mount Rushmore of...
Well, we should probably get to less recognizable games first. Right?
Okay, let's do less recognizable.
I'm happy to go last on this one because I feel pretty confident you guys did not choose mine.
Okay. Megan, I'll let you go first.
Okay. I mean, I also feel confident that you did not choose mine.
Dixit Journey. Oh.
Harmonies.
No. So I went with a Fake Artist Goes to New York.
Oh, yeah.
And
nice.
I don't know if either of you have ever played this, but essentially it's like a Spyfall for art majors. And everyone gets a different colored marker, and everyone but one person gets told what they are drawing. And then the other person does not know what they're drawing. And on a little canvas, each person basically gets to put their marker down, draw until they bring their marker up. And so you're just doing one little part. And so then it's who is the fake artist here in New York who didn't know what you were drawing? And can you draw enough to show that you know, but not so much that it's clear to the fake artist so that they can just continue the drawing accurately? And so there is that social deduction piece to it, which maybe isn't there in Mysterium, but they're kind of adjacent. They're very close. And there's that creativity, which I think the art is such a central component to Mysterium. I don't think you can talk about, just like you can't talk about it without talking about Dixit, you can't talk about Mysterium or Dixit without talking about the art on the cards.
Right.
And I think the art is a central component in A Fake Artist Goes to New York. Just in this case, the players are creating the art, but I think it's really fun. And so, yeah, just from that creativity aspect, I'm comparing the two.
I like it. I like it a lot.
It's a great choice. Imposter Complex, the game.
Yes.
I mean, Fake Artist Goes to New York. I feel like sometimes that's just how I go about life, where everybody knows the answer and I'm just pretending I know as well. But I love that game when you are the imposter and you just very confidently like, oh yeah, sure, and draw something on the page and play it off like, yeah, don't you guys see it? I mean, you know what I'm doing, right? It's such a great game.
I drew a line that's like 3 millimeters long. Of course, that totally ties in with the
right. If you don't see it, then you are the imposter.
Right. Okay, I had a game from 2013 now, and that was Concept. It is a game that has a board full of icons, and you as a team are trying to signal keywords to the other team by selecting the icons on the board that allows them to guess whatever the concept is you're signaling. It always felt more like an activity than a game to me. Like there is a way to keep score and keep track, but really it was more just how did you do that activity and successfully signal things. So what did you have, Dave?
Well, you guys did not pick my pick or my backup pick, I'm very happy to say. So
I've got the double header that I think I am going to pick up one of yours.
Well, that's the thing. So when we first came to this, when I was answering these questions, I thought, well, obviously Dixit, but there isn't really anything else, is there? And then especially when you get into less recognizable comparison, because kind of games that do this sort of thing tend to be in the thousands or lower on BGG rankings for some reason. Right. And I kept coming up with a ton of them. The more I thought about it, I go, oh, well, that's kind of in that, scratches that itch as well.
Right.
But I'm going to go with a game called When I Dream.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that one is one person plays the dreamer, and they actually put on a sleep mask, and so they're blindfolded. And the other players draw cards, and they're not as wild. They don't have the same wild art. It just might be a zebra. Right. Standing on a table or something like that. They don't get as crazy. And then each of the other players are dream spirits, and there's different kinds of dream spirits they can be. One is a fairy, and they're trying to get the blindfolded person to guess the card. So if the zebra comes up, they might say stripes or something like that.
Right.
They're giving good clues. Another person is the boogeyman, and they're trying to get the person to get it wrong. So they're giving disparate clues and, contradictory clues and things like that. And then a third character is the Sandman, I think they're called. And the Sandman is just trying to keep balance between the ones we got right and the ones we got wrong. So they're shifting back and forth to keep those piles equal. And so as the dreamer, you're getting clues and making guesses, but you have no idea. And, you start to figure out, like, based on the, the laughs you hear and things like that, like, I think this person's trying to give me wrong information. But it's that similar sort of thing where you're interpreting pictures and have some limited communication with who you're giving the clues to.
All right. That's a great pick. I had forgotten about that one. Now, do you want to tackle Mount Rushmore, or shall we just ignore it altogether?
I do want to tackle Mount Rushmore, but I want to throw my backup out there, Divinare.
Well, darn it, Dave. That's what I meant. The doubleheader.
Yeah, well, that's your less recognizable comparison, your backup?
No, that's what game is best played after this. What's the doubleheader that you play with Mysterium?
Oh, I see what you're saying. All right.
But go ahead. Let's talk about Divinare.
I'll let you talk about it, because I actually don't remember that game well. I just remember it's a psychic convention or something like that, right? I really like the game, but I can't get
tell.
it. I played it at Paul's house a couple of times.
I was just thinking, I've only played it at Paul's house.
He's the only one I know that has it. Do you have it, Todd?
Does the game only exist at Paul's house?
Right?
Listeners, tell us, have you only played Divinare at Paul's house, or have you played elsewhere? We need to know.
Well, I've played at my house, I've taught this to people. So there are at least 2 places where this gets played.
I need a reprint, or I need an edition of that game.
They definitely need to reprint this game. It is fantastic. What ends up happening is, like, 2/3 of the deck are going to be dealt out, and you're trying to guess how many of each suit are going to be played during that round. And so you have separate cards, or like tiles, where you have your prognostication where you think it's going to end up. And the closer you get to the actual number of cards that get played, the more points you get. But you can't be on the same place as another player. So, like, if Megan gets the perfect pick on the green suit early, then you're like, oh, well, maybe I want the second best. And then you can choose to move yours and clear it off, and then you get to the end of the round. And if you're far enough away, it's negative points. And if it turns out all the colors in a suit, so you're at the edges of the card, or none of them, those are worth like double points. So it's all about how quickly and accurately did you guess how many cards of each suit were going to be played during that round. It's a great game. Yeah. And it's what I would play after Mysterium.
Nice.
So let's go ahead and round that one out, and then we'll go back with all of the candidates on the table.
Well, I do want to talk about Rushmore.
That's what I mean. We'll come back to it after we pick up these other 2 games, just in case.
Okay.
So, Megan, what did you have for the double header game? What would you want to play along with Mysterium?
See, I went a totally different route. I would like something where the pressure is off, where it's not cooperative, so nothing lives or dies because of my performance, or where there's that asymmetric one versus many. Again, too much pressure. So I think a nice, you're only responsible for yourself. So I was actually thinking of a game that was recently on the podcast, Clans. I think would be a nice fit for a game night where it's just, go play a game. Or Transamerica, a game I love, also would be delightful after Mysterium.
I think those are great choices because they're similar weight. Mm-hmm. It's hard to go from a light game to a heavy game, but so if you're playing Mysterium, I really like going to Todd is holding up Divinare. But I think it's difficult to go from co-op to competitive. In Clans, it's competitive, but it's only like secretly competitive, as we talked about. It's not overtly competitive. So I think those are super great choices. My double feature, so because I think it's a little difficult to go from co-op to competitive in the same night, that's a big gear shift, that I like to have something where there's still a little cooperative nature to it. So I'm going to go with Decrypto. Okay. And that's some limited communication. It's some deduction. We're trying to figure out what the other team is trying to do, and they're trying to be deceptive about it. And we have a history with Decrypto in our group that someday you guys will be as good as I am at the game. I am hopeful, and see the level on which I'm playing.
Greg has.
Greg has cracked my code, yes.
Listeners, the history is that whoever was with Dave lost. That was just how that game worked. It was lose with Dave. And
exactly.
And then he and Greg partnered up, And yeah, Greg unlocked the key of Dave, and now there's no stopping them. And it's a terrible evil has been unleashed in the world, and Greg should apologize.
For some reason, when we play those kinds of games, Greg and I can connect. I mean, ways usually you only connect with your spouse, right? When you play those sorts of games with your spouse, you have your own languages and references that only the two of you get. And somehow Greg and I can get there. And I haven't been married to him for 24 years.
I can't wait for Greg to hear this episode.
I know.
He knows our special relationship.
All right, Dave. Now? Mount Rushmore?
Amazing.
Yes. Now I'll allow it.
Okay. So what do you have?
Well, what are the candidates? I think that's where we need to start because
I think we all throw out our ideas and we decide which four get carved on there.
Okay, I can go first if you want. Alchemists.
Okay.
Mind MGMT.
Wow. Okay.
I'm torn between Sleuth or Mystery of the Abbey. There's somewhat versions of the same game where I think I'm going to go Sleuth. Mystery of the Abbey, I like what it's added to it, but it also hits this like drag. So I'm going to go with Sleuth.
Okay.
And Hanabi.
Oh, okay.
That's my Mount Rushmore. Now, I could be talked into things because I want to hear what Megan has to say about Consulting Detective, which I'm thinking might make yours. No? Because I know you've played, I have that game and I always want to play it. And I know you've played it. And I feel like it's a deduction game that's kind of out there for me that I haven't really explored yet.
All right. So you had Alchemist, Hanabi, Sleuth, or Mystery of the Abbey, and what?
Mind MGMT.
Mind MGMT. Okay.
Because you're getting data. I mean, as one of the, whatever it is, but you're getting data and it really is deducible. And which is one of the frustrations I have in the game is it gets down to a 50-50 right at the end because you really are able to deduce down to a very specific point. And that cloud of confusion just dissipates by the end of the game.
That's the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you on Hanabi and Mind MGMT. I think they're right up there. For Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, man, I would never have even considered that for this. I enjoy it. And yet I've played it with other people twice. And both times we were like, let this be done. And so I enjoy it more as a solo experience.
Is it part of that because you're reading out loud to each other?
I think it's hard. I think it's difficult. Now, audience, I'm ready for you to be like, no, it never drags. We're so smart. Whatever. I can handle it. Tell me how savvy you are. But I've played with some very intelligent people and we were like, yeah, I think you have
You have two more.
Okay. Wait, so Mysterium isn't one of mine?
It can be.
Yeah,
It's not one of Dave's.
Put it on there.
All right.
And I have to do one more. Todd, what are you going to pick? And I'll pick one of yours.
But not one of mine.
I'll tell you what I think your fourth pick was going to be.
Okay.
And it's not one of mine. Chronicles of Crime.
No. You know why? Because that app is trash. The app for that game is absolute trash. I have tried playing that game with multiple people during times where like the app just completely failed. So I want to love that game, but no, it's a full-on nightmare. I can't recommend it. I'm trying. If someone wants that game from me, I will give it to you for free. You pay for shipping unless you live near me. Okay, you stumbled on a hot take.
I had no idea, by the way, because we played your copy and we actually got through the game and I thought it was fun.
Yeah, that was like one of 2 times I've had a good experience with that game.
Wow.
A friend of the pod, I did a game day where all we did was play games that started with the letter C. And so we tried to do Chronicles of Crime because it like hit that C multiple times. Yeah. It was super, and we could not get the app to work. It was really frustrating. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So I had Mysterium. I had Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. I was trying to stay away from the hidden movement game. So this is now expanding I'll stick with what I had and we can argue whether or not we put one or more of them on there. Then I had Codenames. And then this is a game I'm going to put on it, even though I've never played it. So I'm totally being open about this one. There's a game out there I really want to try called Blood on the Clock Tower.
Yes, let's play it. Do you have it?
I don't. I don't. This is one of those games that's a massive investment. It's like $100 game.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be just absolutely theme everywhere, really hits it. It has a trader mechanic. And I went the other route. I zagged. Instead of getting Blood on the Clock Tower, I went with My Father's Work, which is more tableau building, worker placement, and also just theme everywhere. And it was also an investment game. So I have yet to play it, but I've heard so many great things about this game that I really want to give it a shot. And I know that I want to like it. I would say it's a contender. So between all of those, if we're going to include hidden movement, though, I mean, then you have
Mr. Jack.
You have Mr. Jack. You have Letters from Whitechapel, or one of the derivations that's a little more streamlined. You're going to have Scotland Yard, which arguably could be on there. And then, you have Mind Management, or MGMT.
I'm surprised Alchemist does not make your list.
It is a deduction game, but I don't think of it in the same vein as these others.
Yeah.
For some reason, that's more like worker placement to me and resource management, because whoever gets to the ingredients first are going to get first pick of those, or gets to the artifacts, right? Or gets to the student that you can test things on.
Right.
Once he's gotten it wrong, the student doesn't test anymore for free. So I just don't think of that as much, although I guess it could be. So let's say Mysterium's on there. I think Megan and I are both agreed that it should be on there.
I'll concede. I'll join in.
You'll join in on that one? All right. So then what do we have?
Hanabi.
I could go for that. All right.
I think Codenames is a very strong contender.
Okay. And then Mind MGMT? Do we want to throw that on there for the hidden movement style of deduction?
So you guys are not on board with Sleuth or Mystery of the Abbey?
I haven't played them.
Oh, not Mystery of the Abbey. We played here not that long ago. You weren't here. I know John was here, and I thought you were here. Sorry to say. But yeah, Mind MGMT sounds good.
That's a pretty good list.
I feel like social deduction is a different Mount Rushmore. Because a little bit of it still has deduction, but it's a little bit of a different animal.
I guess
Right.
I have played Mystery of the Abbey once in 2022, and Paul won.
I think that's the game to which Dave is referring.
I think so.
Okay. So we have Mysterium, Hanabi, Codenames, and Mind MGMT.
Solid list.
That's a pretty good mountain.
Yeah.
Okay. What feature of the game still stands out to you? What has aged the best? Megan?
The feature of the game that still stands out to me is just how beautiful it is. I realize I keep talking about the art, but it's just so notable. It's so beautiful. And I love that the mechanics really encourage you to dwell in the art, get in there,
buy into it.
Look at the details and really appreciate it. And noticing the small things, but also how it makes you feel. Is there a general sense to the card that might be the clue more than any specific object in it? I really, really love that it just encourages you to appreciate that art and get to know it.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree. I had the same thing. I had art and theme. Dave?
I like the subtlety of the limited communication. I like playing with new players and you kind of explain to them what's going to happen and they still seem a little bit blank. And then you hand them a card and say, which of these do you think I'm trying to signal? And you can see them start to unpack it like, oh, is it the color? Is it the theme? Is it they both have round things in them? Is it, there's cooking things involved. There's food.
Right.
And it just starts to open, like bloom, and you can see it on their faces as it's happening. Because I love limited communication games. Anyways, it forces you to become creative. You have to be creative to make this thing work.
Yes, agreed. So what feature of the game now disappoints?
Wait, what was your answer?
It was art and theme. I literally had the spooky art. When I'm looking for a spooky game, the first thing that comes to mind is playing Mysterium.
Yeah, nice.
So what feature of the game now disappoints? What hasn't aged as well? Did you have anything?
Yeah, it's a tough one. The only answer I have is the sameness of the cards. Like after 10 plays, we've talked about it a bunch of times already, the metas start to emerge. And I think those are a little bit against the spirit of the game. It's hard to beat those first couple plays when you're seeing things for the very first time. When you start to see those cards second and third time, it loses a little bit of its shine.
Right. Yeah, good call. Megan, what did you have?
I think for me, it's just the pressure.
Yes.
And especially, there can be those moments, not that this might have happened to me, but where like the other psychics are already 2 steps ahead of you and you just feel like an absolute jerk. And that for me takes away from the fun a little bit.
Okay. I could see that. I had the game length. Like this game, especially at the higher player counts, outstays its welcome. If there were ways to shave it, then that would be very welcome. And yet, by the same token, it is a social experience. So that part I don't mind. So it's a bit of a nitpick. I would like this game to be faster, which tends to be my response in many of these situations. It's like, this game takes too long. So I guess I'm the one constant in all of my failed relationships. And so I guess I'm taking too long to play the game. So did this game replace a previous one? And if so, what? And I'll just jump out there and say that it's definitely replaced both of my comparison games. So Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, and Concept both got replaced by this. Like when I think about playing this specific style of game where I am trying to signal the group, Mysterium is like my go-to for it. How about you two? Megan?
I don't know the last time this group's played Dixit. Not that I'm sorry to bring Dixit up again, but I think that's what it's replaced. You know, you want to see that pretty art, but I think we're looking for a little bit more than what Dixit has to offer. So we play Mysterium.
Mm-hmm. Does Mysterium streamline the Dixit experience? Because in Dixit, you're having to create the story that describes your card, and you've got that built-in modifier that you don't want everybody to get it. So if you're not good at storytelling, it's fine because you're supposed to be vague. Whereas Mysterium provides at least a framework for the story and the narrative.
Yeah.
So do you feel like it's a streamlined experience in Mysterium?
Yeah, I do like it provides that scaffolding.
There you go. That's a better word.
I feel like it's the other way around, though. Dixit feels a little more streamlined to me.
Really?
It's simpler.
Okay. It is, but it requires more creativity on the parts of the players.
Yeah, that layer of the Flight of Icarus, where you can't be too obvious, but you can't be too vague.
Right.
I mean, that's what makes it work so well.
Audience, just so you know, Dave has now revealed that he is a wolf in this podcast recording.
Yes.
From what he just said.
I didn't say the word. I didn't say the phrase.
That is such a classic Dave tell. I love it.
Yeah. In a social deduction game or hidden traitor game, if I accuse somebody of flying too close to the sun, it's because I am the wolf. That's what we've determined. I didn't even realize that was my tell.
Right.
Anyways, for me, this game replaced Mystery of the Abbey. So Mystery of the Abbey used to be my go-to to fill that spot where we've got new people. They're familiar with Clue, so they kind of understand the basics. But now we get to move around, and the theme in Mystery of the Abbey is so great, but it does kind of drag in the middle, whereas this has this, fits that perfectly into where a brand new player can just jump in and play ready to go. So I do not play Mystery of the Abbey near as much as I used to before Mysterium existed. This is a direct one game replaced another game, but very specific for me.
Yeah.
But whereas Dixit, though, so Mysterium, since I like it so much with new players, if I'm with just my family, we're definitely going to go to Dixit over Mysterium. So for me, it doesn't replace. They both exist at the same time for me.
Okay.
They're separate experiences.
Yeah. So do you have a different answer then for has this game since been replaced? And if so, by what? And it sounds like you're still going to it.
No, it's still my go-to. Yeah. In fact, I played it last summer when, we had, new people over to show them a new game. So it's yearly. I am showing this to new players, once or twice, 3 times a year. So it has not been replaced. I don't have another game that fits that space.
Mm-hmm. Megan?
No, I don't have anything that fills this Mysterium void that Mysterium. Yeah, no, I'd rather play Mysterium. There's a reason I own it, my game collection just is a pale shadow of what anyone else in the groups is. And so if I own it, that means that it really has a place in my heart. So
nice.
Sometimes, Megan, a board game is like a boat. It's better to know somebody who owns it than to have one for yourself. So now that you've moved, that doesn't quite work. But when you live nearby,
yes,
you don't need to own the games. You just need to know the people who do.
Yes.
And her collection just went through the moving culling.
Yeah.
Oh, nothing got culled. Nothing got culled. But it is all still in boxes.
Got it.
I mean, because I don't have anyone here to play with. So listeners, if you live in the Denver area, reach out to Todd and he'll vet you. And if you pass his test, you'll get to know me. So
wow, that's talk about pressure. All right. So I had probably Codenames Do It. Like I really like Codenames Do It. And if I think about deduction games, I would probably lean there, and I like the cooperative nature of it. I also liked Message from the Stars, which was released this year, but it didn't really catch on with us. So unfortunately, that's one that probably has seen its last play with our group. So soundtrack. What music would you want to listen to while playing? And I'm going to point out that Libellude provides one. In the game manual, they have a QR code you can scan, takes you to their site, and they have a list of, free licensed music you can download and play as background music. Kudos to them for understanding and enhancing the ambiance of the game while playing.
I didn't realize that. Good find.
Yeah. If you have any selections outside of it, I'd love to hear them. Dave?
Well, we always have this topic. And often it's very theoretical. Like, I'm not really going to put music on when we play Great Western Trail, though we could come up with some good ideas. And we did probably when we did the podcast. But this game very specifically, I think, is enhanced by the music. I answered this on the same thing on one of our other podcasts. I don't remember which, but any sort of dark academia playlist.
Okay.
And, you could it's like dark academia ambiance, just the background noises. There's actually a band called Nox Arcana, which I found by doing dark academia playlists, because I'll sometimes read to that. And, if I'm in a noisy area, I'll put that in my headphones. But Nox Arcana has a bunch of songs and albums that fit perfectly in.
Nice. Megan?
I was inspired by Al's response to this in a recent episode. And I was actually thinking about specific songs. And so I am going to recommend just a specific song. And I'm not saying over and over and over again, but just include this in your Mysterium playlist. And it's I Saw You in a Dream by the Japanese House. Okay. And it's just the vibes are right. I encourage you to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I had a 1979 album that we had it on vinyl, and my parents would play it at Halloween night so that, the house would sound spooky as people were coming up to trick or treat. And it is called The New Chilling Thrilling Sounds of the Haunted House. And it was published by the Walt Disney Sound Effects Group.
I know that album. It's like a screeching cat and a hooting owl and all that stuff.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So it's just the background spooky sounds that would be perfect for this game.
Yeah, it's great.
So rating. On Board Game Geek's scale of 1 to 10 now, how would you rate Mysterium? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I have this currently rated on BGG as an 8, and that is an aspirational 8. I want to love it like an 8, but I probably like it like a 6 or a 7. But I want it to be an 8, so that's where I've placed it. Yeah, I feel like I should enjoy it more than I do. And I think you guys agree. I think you guys are thinking Mysterium is a Megan game, and I feel like it should. I don't know why it isn't clicking at that level yet for me, but I want it to. So I'm rating it there, right? It's dress for the job you want, rate the game for the amount you want to love it.
That's great. I agree. I had it as an 8 as well, but it's a little bit like a Dos Equis commercial, right? I don't always want to play deduction games, but when I do, I want to play Mysterium, and so it's an 8. What did you have, Dave?
I also have it as an 8. I think normally a game like this, I would probably give it a 7, but this one gets the family favorite bump, is that it is a family favorite for me. And look, I think every 10 plays you have of a game, your rating should get a 5% bump or something like that, right? So if you've played a game 50 times, you better have it rated 8 or up. And I haven't played this 50, but you can't play a game 100 times and say I rated a 6. So I think it's just the nature of it. I've played it so much, I could not relate it below an 8.
Yeah, I like that approach. And I agree. I mean, if it were a 6, why would you keep playing it over and over and over again?
Right.
And not that a 6 is a bad game, but there are better ones out there. So then, is it replayable, and how soon would you want to revisit this game? So, David, sounds like we've heard your answer. Yeah, how often could you revisit it?
I mean, it's 4 times a year. I mean, quarterly, I guess we could play it, going on the fiscal quarter.
Right.
It's not an every month kind of game, because I think it works really well as an event game. It's not a rinse and repeat game.
Right.
I'm not discovering new layers to this. The more times I play, now I'm going to try this gambit, or I'm going to try to do it this way. Like, I feel like I've gotten all the game has to offer. So now it's just revisiting as you would revisit like a favorite movie, people who watch movies over and over and things like that. So it's 4 times a year.
Okay. Yeah, Megan?
I think that's a very solid cadence. I think 3 to 4 times a year is good, but absolutely replayable. And I would like to replay it. So I just need to find people to play with me.
Or we can do the substandard digital experience.
Womp womp.
Right?
Yeah. Well, since you'll be looking for new players and new game groups in your new location where you live now, you've got the perfect game. You just have to learn how to play the ghost.
Yeah, the issue is there are, in fact, plenty of FLGS near here and like board game cafes and stuff. But then I'm just like walking around like, hey, like, I don't know. Like, yeah, it's a matter of finding my people.
Right? We have the Orange County Board Gamers Meetup group. You'll just have to look to see if there's a group near you because they had a lot of different events. We met online, but it turned out you guys were going to those events. And so I remember that's how I met you in real life was by going to one of the events at the Duck Club in Irvine. So I also had it as replayable, and I could revisit it 2 or 3 times a year, in person. It's definitely a good one, and the artwork and the theme just really set it apart and make it an experience. And with that, our mystery has been solved. It was Megan all along, not Agatha.
We knew from the beginning.
For our next episode, we'll be heading back into space for a game we can't seem to get to the table enough lately. Thank you both for being available today. This was a lot of fun to discuss.
Thanks for having me.
Hurry back.
Hurry back.
Jeez.
Thank you for listening to Replayable. Support for our podcast comes from listeners like you. Please subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a review wherever you listen to us. Thank you for your support. Come and talk about board games with us at replayable.fm or on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook as ReplayableFM. You can also join our team at patreon.com/replayable. We welcome your feedback, which is the only way that we are going to get better. You can get in touch with us via email at feedback@replayable.fm. And if you're interested in sponsoring us, then please contact us at sponsors@replayable.fm.